Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have an extremely special ceremony here for Sandi Adams. Everybody give us a round of applause for Sandi Adams. Now, Sandi, I did say we had a surprise. And what did Sandi ask? She then asked about, well, what could you not tell me what the surprise is? And then I had to say, then it wouldn't be a surprise, Sandi, would it? And the surprise, Sandi, is that you have got a dedicated mug all for you.
Thank you so much. This is hilarious. I mean, I didn't actually realise this was going to be up on a screen, on a mug, or anything. I happened to just send Giles this because I thought it was funny.
It's Miles.
Miles, not just Miles.
People keep calling me
Why did
Giles.
I call you Giles? I just thought, do you know what? I had it. This cartoonist did it because he was an awake cartoonist in Brazil, and a friend of the friend I was staying with, and yeah, he did it, and I thought, oh, well, that's cool. And I sent it to Miles just for a laugh, and look what happened. Anyway,
so you can buy those out the back. Now you know it's Sandi Adams because if you look really carefully, you'll see her finger or thumb ever so slightly on the side of the picture.
How do you?
We had to anamorphically swing it.
Oh, right. That's interesting.
So that's unique. These are worth money, you know. Right, ladies and gentlemen, Sandi Adams, United Nations Agenda 21, what is it, etc.
Yeah.
And welcome to the BASES project, BASES 2023. We're live on Facebook as well, the BASES project. I think we're all flashing in the right place and we're all in record. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sandi Adams.
Thank you very much. There we go. Yes, I mean, I've been on this journey for quite a long time. I used to work in the corporate world, which is where I sort of got a bit of an awakening as to, we're talking about 17, 18 years ago. And I had I trained as a set designer, and I worked in theatre and television, which I loved. And then, you know, in the 80s, things got very corporate, and I found myself, because I've got kids and a mortgage to pay and, you know, things like that, and I ended up working in corporate live events, designing sets for installations, and I found myself working for all the bad people, for Google, Eric Schmidt in Google, and I ended up working for GlaxoSmithKline. I'm very ashamed to say this, but this is what, I wasn't fully awake then, and it didn't take long for me to realise. And I did work for Microsoft, and I met Bill Gates, and I was putting an installation into Chelsea, which was a kind of futuristic, connected a London square, if you like. I had to create a London square with all the connectivity that went into it. And I'd been reading about Agenda 21, and I suddenly thought, this is how they're going to do it. And I got out of that, and I ran away to the West Country, and I've been on this mission now to expose it for the last 16, 17 years. So here I am, and another wonderful person who woke me up was this lady. Oh dear, that's fallen down. There's a lovely lady called Rosa Corey, who's sadly not with us anymore. She exposed Agenda 21 in the States many, many years ago, and she wrote this book called Behind the Green Mask. It's how the green agenda was used to really, as a Trojan horse, to bring in all the AI, all the control that they needed via the Earth Summit, and she exposed it. I started to communicate with her, and she said, you do it in England. So I just did. I wanted to get her over here. She didn't come because she was too busy. And now, unfortunately, she passed away, and she was young. God knows what happened there, but not very good. And she passed away. She was only about 52. So anyway, she was an absolute warrior. And I owe a lot to her, because if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. So Agenda 21, what is it? I mean, it's the agenda for the 21st century. And unfortunately, it was brought in at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. So I've got a copy of it here. It's a 42-chapter document, incredibly boring, with lots of fluffy speak about sustainability. But the essence of it is that we have destroyed the planet, and we have to take almost make the environment far more important than anything else. And what happened in Rio, at the Rio summit, is they launched Agenda 21 after really working out an agenda, probably since the 1970s, on how they were going to do it. And they did it through the Club of Rome reports, which I'll go into. So Agenda 21, it was written really, on the face of it, it talks of sustainability, environmentalism, conservation, but at its heart, it seeks to divine man from nature and control all of the resources. So it's taken, in this particular document and in the larger document I have down there, it documents, it's like a control and inventory of every single resource on our planet and how they are going to manage it, meaning the United Nations, because it's United Nations Agenda 21. So it's about how they will control every resource, and we're seeing this happen now with land grabs and the destruction of our farming and the destruction of our food supply. Everything that is happening is really down to what happened in Rio in 1992. And I'll go into who was there. The precursors to Agenda 21 were 3 very important Club of Rome reports, which influenced its creation. And I'll just go into those in a minute. Now I'm just trying to... How do I move it on? Sorry. It's not on my computer. Oh, here we go. Now, this is the Club of Rome. It's a global think tank for the United Nations, and it was founded in 1968 at the Rockefeller private estate in Bellagio, Italy, by Aurelio Peccei. He was one of the founders, along with Alexander King and Bertram Schneider. Peccei was an Italian industrialist for the Rockefeller Foundation and the United Nations. And the main purpose of the Club of Rome is to formulate a crisis to which the world can be united under a world government. Global problems need global solutions. So they sort of create a crisis. It's like crisis creation, problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialect. Let's create a problem that needs a global solution, and we'll be in charge of that solution. So that's kind of what they're all about. And in the 70s, one of the first kind of think tank document that the Club of Rome came out with was this one. It's called Limits to Growth. And this is all about depopulation and population control. And we're talking 1970. And this was commissioned by the UN. And in the 1970s, there was a big panic about, and it was all computer modeled. And we know where that's got us, with all the computer modelling that went on with what's happened in the last 3 years. And also BSE, and the same person, Neil Ferguson, was in charge of all of that, BSE, mad cow disease, and COVID. So, and it was a disaster. And this was a disaster too, because it was all done on computer modelling at the time, making wild assumptions that there's not enough resources to go round, that we have to restrict the population because there's simply not enough resources to go round. And they come up with all sorts of ideas about depopulation in there. And there was another guy at the time, there was a writer called Paul Ehrlich who wrote a book called The Population Bomb, which, again, wild assumptions, it didn't go off. The population bomb didn't go off. And there's so much in Agenda 21 about how they have to control every aspect of the human condition. And this is what we're talking about. Now, in 1976, I'm sort of dealing with the 70s at the moment, you had the United Nations Vancouver Plan, which was a big conference that happened in Vancouver. And they talked about land because, as we know, this is a massive land grab. Land, because of its unique nature and the crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of the accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes, social justice, urban renewal and development. The provision of decent dwellings can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. So we're talking about a communitarian idea of the way of land use, which would be fine if there wasn't a controlling body at the very top of all of this, and that's the problem, is it's all about controlling and keeping the land for themselves. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski was a big mover and shaker in the 1970s. He was in all of the things like the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, Council for Foreign Relations, big mover and shaker. And he revived the technocracy movement of the 1930s. So this has been a long-term plan, really. It was a very sort of almost Operation Paperclip thing that happened in the 1930s when the war was over, everything shifted, the real Nazis were actually put over in America, where they could actually develop the whole technocratic sort of agenda, if you like, the whole space race, everything. All the scientists went over. And Zbigniew Brzezinski was really rebirthing what happened in the 1930s, the technocracy movement in America. And so he wrote something called America's Role in the Technocratic Era, and he studied political science at Columbia University with M.K. Hubbard and Howard Scott, who were the founders of the technocracy movement in America in the 1930s. He was key in forming the new economic order. I spelt that wrong. A resource-based economy, CO2 and carbon taxing. So they were trying to, in the 1930s, they were trying to create a carbon-based economy, even then. And it didn't quite work. The war got in the way, and it all sort of went underground. But this is where it actually bubbled up again in the 1970s with Zbigniew Brzezinski. Resources are more valuable than money in the technocratic age. They must be controlled and owned. And this is what happened. And also, a lot happened in Columbia University at that time. Klaus Schwab was there, George Soros, all the big movers and shakers. David Rockefeller came in and out. It was very much a hotbed of if you like, a plan to take control of everything at Columbia University. So many of them came from there at that time. So the technocracy movement of the 1930s was after the Great Depression in the 1930s. Everybody hated politicians and bankers, and why not? Very similar to now, actually. And it was led by political scientists and engineers, M.K. Hubbard and Howard Scott from Columbia. They proposed a replacement of capitalism with an energy-based economy as opposed to a price-based economy. It was reintroduced by the Trilateral Commission, Brzezinski, in 1979, as the new economic order known as sustainable development, and that is Agenda 21, and the green economy. Many alumni of Columbia are heading up the present agenda. You've got Klaus Schwab, Amitai Etzioni, who's actually dead now, but he invented communitarianism. George Soros, David Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and more. They were an elite group of technocrats trying to implement what was then global warming to create a new carbon-based economy. So it goes back such a long way. Now, the next Club of Rome report that makes the bones of Agenda 21 is this one. This is called the Brundtland Commission Report by Grohol and Brundtland. This was commissioned in 1987, and this was another move towards the technocratic, agenda. This was about how we could, Europe was being unified. The wall came down in 1989, so it's just before the wall came down. So, and that was all, obviously, that was all meant to be. It was all planned to unify Europe. The whole European Union thing was unifying Europe. And this was really created to get everybody on board, really, with what they call, I suppose it was, equality. It was all about financial equality of the world. And what they proposed in this one was a shift of the money that they called us the polluting West, the rich polluting West. We had to give money to India and China to make it equitable. And this is what happened. This is why during the 1980s, all our manufacturing went over to India and China, and we got left behind. And it's interesting that they're now the big emitters, and they don't pay all the carbon taxes, but we still do. And this is really what this was about. It was about making financial equity, but in the same time, very successfully destroying the West. The West has to be destroyed, because we were the affluent ones, we were the ones that thought for ourselves. The rest of the world, quite compliant. They have to break us now, which is why we're being hammered. So that's that one. Right, let's have a look. And then the last Club of Rome report that before the Earth Summit was this one. This is, sorry, it's very well leafed. This is called The First Global Revolution. And this was written in 1991, just before the Earth Summit. And this was the reason for this whole book, and it's quite easy, is to identify enemies. And it's quite interesting, because what they did was this is where global warming became the driver for technocratic control. And I'll try and find the quote. This one really was from it's the crisis. This is the crisis that they would actually be able to gain control with, because they start talking in here about identifying enemies. Here we go. And let's face it, bankers and globalists need enemies, because if they've got enemies, then they can identify enemies and create wars, which are very good for them. The need for enemies seems to be a common and historical factor. Is my thingy gone? Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Oh, that's better. There we are. The need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. States have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by designating external enemies. The scapegoat practice is as old as mankind itself. When things become too difficult at home, divert attention by adventure abroad, bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or one invented for the purpose. Can you believe that? I mean, so they were trying to identify an enemy, and they found one. And this is the enemy that they found. Right. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages and famine and the like would fit the bill. So they just came up with it. It's just chucking ideas around. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it's only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. This is why we are under attack, ladies and gentlemen, because we are the enemy, and they have to deal with us. And what they want is to grab all the resources on the planet, and we are surplus to requirement, which is why we're being treated the way we are. So that's the bones of Agenda 21. And then we come to the Earth Summit itself. Now, the grandfather of Agenda 21 was Maurice Strong. He was a Canadian billionaire, oil billionaire, and he worked for the Rockefellers for many, many years in their asset management departments. He was a massive mover and shaker. He was born into poverty in Canada in the 1920s, I think. And but he became he's very charismatic, became incredibly influential until he became the chairman of the United Nations Earth Summit. And he belonged to the Council for Foreign Relations, a member of the Fabian Society, a self-confessed communist in ideology, and capitalist in methodology. So he's a perfect communitarian. Because does anybody know what communitarianism means? Anybody in the audience know? Oh, you do. Oh, well done. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a very cleverly crafted way of creating the hive mind, if you like, getting everybody to think one world government, one world religion, one world currency, one world everything, so that the controllers can actually control that one world everything. And this is Maurice Strong. He was exiled to China to avoid prison in the United States for being involved in the oil for food scandal in 1995, where the UN Security Council made a resolution to supply Iraq with food in exchange for oil. He was a big mover and shaker in the oil business. There were revelations of corruption of funds involving Maurice Strong and Adnan Khashoggi and many other oil billionaires, including the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. So this is the man that headed up the Earth Summit. Now, he's an oil billionaire, and he's advocating that global warming, a fossil fuel, and all that stuff is wrong. We've got to get rid of it. You've got to stop flying your planes. You've got to stop driving your cars because it's bad for the planet. No, it's bad for the globalists. That's what they're all about. And he actually said the effective execution of Agenda 21 will require profound engineering of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. Now, this really feeds into what's happening now with the environmental, social governance contracts that businesses are now having to adhere to, because it is actually an environmental consequence of every human action. And this is where they're going to try and get us. And so many people don't realize this is all happening in the background, that all this environmental contracts are coming into our daily lives. And if we don't adhere to it, then if we go into the whole monetary CBDCs and all that, they can cut you off. It's just like the Chinese social credit system. And Maurice Strong actually ended his days in China. He loved China. His cousin lived with Mao Zedong, and he thought the Chinese social system, the social credit system, the one-child policy, was the way forward for the rest of the world. And this is why we have what we have in place now. So this is a big passion of mine to reveal this. Now, a few years after the Earth Summit, 2 years actually, this came out, which was the action plan. If Agenda 21 was the plan, this was the plan put into action, and it's massive. It's over 1,000 pages, and again, this is written by policymakers, and it's how they will manage all the resources on our planet and manage us as well. And it's incredibly boring to read. I've read an awful lot of it. And I've definitely got the gist of what's going on. And this is a way of inventorizing everything on the planet, every resource, every mineral, every plant, every rock, everything, and how it's to be managed with, to bring in sustainable development, which is Agenda 21. And that was going to be brought into every single, the policies of Agenda 21 were brought into every single town council in the world, and it's in every town council here, which is, there's quite a few people now challenging their town councils on all the policies that were brought through by something called ICLEI, which is the International Committee for Local Environmental Initiatives. Now, this was brought in to bring the global agenda that they launched at the Earth Summit. And at the Earth Summit, they got 178 countries to sign up to Agenda 21. They invited all the world leaders to this extraordinarily lavish conference in Rio de Janeiro. Prince Charles was there on Royal Yacht Britannia. They had all their floating gin palaces in the harbour, and they kind of got everybody drunk, gave them a good time and said, to save the planet, you've got to sign up to Agenda 21. And they did, 178 countries. It was then a non-legally binding. It was a soft binding document. But since then, it's got harder and harder and harder. So it's been encoded now into law, international law. And this is the problem. And what they've done is through ICLEI, the International Committee for Local and Environmental Initiatives, it was then brought from global to local. So it was brought into your town council, wherever you are, you will find that they have possibly called a climate emergency. They're doing all the stuff towards net zero. They're actually having a thing called climate literacy training that they're pushing out. And I managed to get the coursework for that. Got a big shock because actually within that coursework, not only is it talking about not flying, not driving your car, we've got to have restrictions. We've also got to have one less child. So it's straight out of the Chinese Communist playbook. So and this climate literacy is in your town council now. If your town councillors haven't had it yet, they will be doing that training. And then they're being told to push it out into the community. So this is a real problem. And you'll find that a lot of community groups will appear or already have appeared probably since in the last 10 years. And these are community organisers that try and push this agenda. They're actually quite well trained in NLP and common purpose, and these will be appearing in your community and targeting sort of groups like sort of elderly groups and young people's groups and all that sort of thing to try and get, because it is a big psychological thing, to get it all out. And then along with the ICLEI, to get it from global to local, you've got the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was created just before the Earth Summit to pay scientists to push the global warming agenda. And to say, look, this is, everybody's going to die if we don't adhere to this. Not realizing that it's actually a plan for the globalists to take over everything. The 3 E's of sustainable development are social equity. Individuals give up their personal rights for the needs of the community. That sounds very worthy, doesn't it? But the individual rights are very important. Our individuality is really important. Economic prosperity, free market replaced by public-private partnerships, international wealth transfer. Now we're seeing all this public-private partnerships now coming in to our sphere. We've now got the financialization of nature, where public-private partnerships are buying up our land. Are taking it out of the public domain and putting it into the, if you like, the domain of the state, and not allowing us. I mean, there's loads of problems with walking rights, rambling rights now, with farmers being allowed to graze their cattle on Exmoor and Dartmoor. They've done that for hundreds of years. They're being told, oh no, it's not sustainable. You've got to get rid of your cattle. You've got to get rid of your sheep. Not sustainable. So this is, ClimateGate, I don't know whether to go into that too much, but this really was something that was suppressed in 2009. 1,079 emails were hacked at the University of East Anglia and the Hadley Research Centre by a US intelligence agency. The content of these emails were damning for the global warming lobby. Michael Mann from Penn State University was encouraging the scientists at these institutions to falsify the data to hide the decline in the temperatures, because the temperatures were going down and they needed them to go up to keep this momentum going with the lie. In real time, the temperature data, and they wanted to alter the graphs. So that there's something called the hockey stick that Michael Mann is well known for, where the graph was one of the lies that came out of ClimateGate. So he made the temperature go up, and it looks like a hockey stick. Shoring up the industry of climate change, and all of that was suppressed. A wonderful man that used to. I went down to the Somerset Levels at one point because it flooded really badly, and I met a chap there called Christopher Booker. He was a journalist, lovely old man. He was a journalist for the Telegraph and the Mail, And he wrote this amazing PDF. Do look it up. It's Global Warming, a case of studying groupthink. It's got all the facts there, all the facts. If you really want to know about climate change, he was at all the Paris, he was at the Stockholm conference, the first one, the first COP conference. He went to every, but sadly he's passed on now. But he was at the Paris Climate Agreement, where Trump walked out. I'm not a Trump supporter by any means, but I still don't know. Love him, hate him, I have no idea. But you know, he was right to walk out of the Paris Climate Conference because they were trying to get an agreement. And because India and China were pushing out all the emissions, he said no. I'm not. This is ridiculous. Well, our emissions are much lower, and he walked out. So they couldn't get an agreement. It had to be called the Paris Accord. And it's really funny. Whenever I see it, they call it the agreement. It wasn't, because they didn't get enough votes. So that's what happened in Paris in 2015. And you can buy The Hockey Stick Illusion. That's a good book, if you really want to know about it. And CO2, I mean, it's the gas of life. You know, this is what happens to plants and trees and human beings, actually. If you don't have enough CO2 in the atmosphere, you know, we use the oxygen that they put out. I mean, this is basic stuff, and yet it's become a pollutant. How did that happen? How did CO2 become a pollutant? They kind of conflated it with carbon monoxide, because in the Global Diversity Assessment, they talk about carbon monoxide, which is, you know, obviously what cars, you know, give out if they don't have catalytic converters. But all of this, you know, CO2 is you know, it's not a dangerous gas. It's the gas of life, and we need it. Otherwise, everything dies. Whether to go through, I'm just worried about time. The Rockefeller Lockstep documents came out in 2010, and it's quite interesting how these have manifested, because there were 4 of them, and it was called the Rockefeller Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development, which is kind of, you know, pushing Agenda 21. And they had one of them, which was called Lockstep, and it's a world of tighter top-down government control, more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. A virus emerges from a third world country and rapidly spreads across the world, destroying the economies of the West. This is 2010, okay? Destroying the economies of the West. Governments use the virus as an excuse to advance technocratic surveillance, implementing transhumanist and biological technologies, and vaccine passports. In the scenario, the masses blindly welcome the tyranny, abandoning their sovereignty for the greater good. So this is unbelievable that they published this, and then they've got some other scenarios that they came up with. Now so we've had Lockstep. There's one called Clever Together, a world in which a highly coordinated and successful strategy emerges for addressing both urgent and entrenched worldwide issues. Strong cooperation on a range of issues drives technological breakthroughs that combat disease, climate change, and energy shortages. Hack attack is one of them, because let's face it, Klaus Schwab keeps talking about a cyber attack. Due to a cyber attack and an economically unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weaken, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. And then Smart Scramble is, I think, how they find solutions to it all. An economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. But, you know, this is the scenarios that they want, not what we want. And what's interesting is that nothing in Agenda 21, the Rio Declaration, even acknowledges the idea that we humans are free, born free and sovereign over the governments that they create. Nothing acknowledges the idea that government's first responsibility is to protect the inherent freedoms of the people, particularly the freedom to own and use property. To the contrary, everything about the Rio Summit documents, Agenda 21, which then became 2030, aims to limit human freedom and to restrict the use of private property until it can be placed in the public domain. As sweeping as the summit documents are, they are the first step in the march to global governance. That's a quote from my book, which I'm writing, hopefully. So this whole thing really is not about us. It's about how they can gain the global governance they need. Now, this is when Agenda 2030 became, 2021 became Agenda 2030, and it was in 2015 at the Vatican, funnily enough. It was in the last week of September. Pope Francis met Obama to make his keynote speech to the UN General Assembly on the future of the world and to unveil Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 is just a goal. It was where they dreamt up the 17 goals. Prior to that, it had been 8 goals, the eight Millennium Goals, I think they were called, and they didn't work. They didn't move fast enough, and so they had to accelerate it. And turning it into Agenda 2030 was a form of acceleration. And we're in a lot of accelerationism at the moment, and COVID has done that too, which I'll get onto. So they launched the 17 goals to be achieved by 2030. There's 17 sustainable goals. If you haven't looked at them, look them up. They're on the UN website. They sound amazing. Like, we're going to end poverty. We're going to do this. Equality for all of this. I will go into some if we've got time, but look them up anyway. They launched the 17 goals back in 1965. Pope Paul VI pledged the loyalty of the Catholic Church to the effectively making the Catholic Church the United Nations servant on earth. So he actually pledged his loyalty to the United Nations. This is a bit of, I find this really sinister. So the local deployment of Agenda 21 was completed, and Agenda 2030 brings it into the global arena, really pushes it forward. So that happened in 2015. And also at the same, 2016, you got these 2 books written by Klaus Schwab, which only kind of emerged in 2020 when the pandemic was going on. The 4th Industrial Revolution and the COVID, the Great Reset. I mean, he wrote those in 2016, but they only emerged when when it all started kicking off. And you've got the Great Reset, all that stuff. And Klaus Schwab, who is he? I mean, he has a very, very dark history. His father was Eugene Schwab, who worked in Germany. He was an industrialist in Ravensburg in Germany in the 1930s. And he had an engineering company called Escher Engineering. And he employed Jewish slave labor, funnily enough. And he collaborated with the Nazi quest to create nuclear technology. And he was instrumental in creating machinery vital to the Nazi war effort. And Klaus Schwab himself was involved with illegal nuclear development in South Africa, supporting the apartheid regime in the 1960s. He heads up the Davos meetings every year since 1971 for global leadership, the 4th Industrial Revolution, or is it the 4th Reich? I know which I think it is. And he's actually did say the COVID-19 outbreak is the first big step towards unprecedented control over mankind. He says the most outrageous things, and he's still on the BBC, and they think he's great. I don't understand this. He's very open about the agenda. Unbelievable. And he's headed up the leadership. Klaus Schwab's leadership. He's got this leadership council. And he's sort of got this, it's almost like a common purpose for global leaders. He gets people and he trains them up, and it's people like Zelensky, Trudeau, all of that lot, Jacinda Ardern, all of that lot who, seem to be put into positions of great power, but actually they're not very bright, and they seem to be pushing this agenda very, very very hard. And they're all graduates of Schwab's indoctrination, his camp for young global globalist leaders. And his Global Leaders for Tomorrow was established in 1992. Again, same time as the Earth Summit. It was all kicking in. Their whole agenda was the wheels were in motion. Now called the Leadership Council for Future Technologies. The first students were Angela Merkel, Nicolas Sarkozy, Tony Blair. There are currently 1,300 graduates, including Jacinda Ardern, Emmanuel Macron, Jean-Claude Juncker, Justin Trudeau, Vladimir Putin, the German Green lady, I can never pronounce her name. Anyway, they've all got quite sparse CVs, but they've been put in very, very powerful positions. Now, this is 19. We're now jumping to 2019, and we'd had Greta Thunberg in 2018 wagging her finger at us about global warming. I still call it global warming, and I don't call it climate change because it's changed for millions of years. But she was there, and it didn't go well. She wasn't really received in England terribly well, apart from XR and Just Stop Oil and all the, Earth First and all that lot, who are controlled by Soros anyway. So she sort of scuttled back, and they had to do something to accelerate sustainable development. So what they did was Klaus Schwab and Antonio Guterres, who's now the leader of the UN, they got together in Geneva. And they put this document together, which is the United Nations Strategic Framework Partnership document. And it was about accelerating Agenda 2030. And they were very open about it. This is the document, they've got a picture, we're going to accelerate 2030. Now, how were they going to do it? They decided what they were going to do, but we didn't know. And literally 4 months later, in Johns Hopkins facility in New York, we had Event 201, literally in November. So from June, when they decided to accelerate it, we then had November 2019. And they held this tabletop exercise, just like the Rockefeller document. It was what would happen if it was a what-if scenario event. It's three days long. I think you can still find it on the web. And it was a 3-day event saying, well, what would we do if a virus escaped from a wet market in Brazil, this was, and how would we deal with it? And they all sat around these big tables, and who was there? They had invited Bill and Melinda Gates. And it was, we've got a vaccine, we can deal with this. So this is how they did it. And do you know what? That our world changed, really, in 2020, as you know, because this is when we were sleeping. All the infrastructure for the AI, the cameras, everything was really accelerated. When we were locked up, cameras were going up. Biometrics were going into supermarkets. I don't know if any of you noticed, but the self-service tills, suddenly the human tills are going, and you've got the self-service tills. You've got the bankers talking about cashless society, which, I must admit I've been talking about for 16 years, that getting rid of cash. COVID got rid of cash so well, didn't it? Oh, it's dirty, it's got the virus on it. No, we only use cards. So all of this is so easily linked to your social credit score and everything, because all the transactions, instead of if they bring in, and they're going to try CBDC, which is central banking digital system, and they're going to try and bring in a digital ID, then everything is tracked and traced. Every time you use your credit card, and you go into a supermarket and you're at those horrible self-service tools, which I won't use, I queue up and go along the human one, because they've got the cameras there, the facial recognition cameras, linking your face to your credit card. So this all happened overnight. All the LED lampposts went up, which again can be upgraded to do all sorts of things. And they've actually got they've got docking stations in the pipeline for docking drone technology, surveillance drone technology, because Amazon have got the contract for delivering all their parcels by drone to your house. So there won't be any drivers. This is to get rid of the workforce and give them UBI, Universal Basic Income. This is how they're going to hook us in, because we'll be dependent on the state. Because really, we are surplus to requirement. They've got all the machines they need. And Klaus Schwab is very, very open about what will we do with we're going to have a redundant workforce. I'm so worried about this. He's not worried at all. It's his dream, These people they're mental, totally mental. And then, we've got the WHO pandemic treaty. Now, the WHO, at the moment, our government is being run by the WHO, the WEF, and the United Nations. And unfortunately, our politicians, we've got no politicians. We don't have any political parties anymore. They are all working on the guidelines of the WHO, the WEF, and the United Nations. And so this is why the government have given up, with the WHO pandemic treaty, they've given up any involvement if there is another pandemic. It's going to be run by the WHO, who will mandate everything. So this is why, we've got to really push for this treaty not to go through. I think it's halfway there, but I do look it up, the WHO Pandemic Treaty. This will give the WHO powers to implement lockdowns like the ones we saw in Shanghai and Beijing, using increased totalitarian rule and house arrests. Why are the WHO given these powers? They are unelected and unaccountable, like all of the stuff we're getting. We didn't vote for this. They're using our money to implement all this nonsense. And, we have to really find our power, our individual power, and not be like a hive mind load of people that just go along with everything. We have to say no, and we do not consent to this. We didn't, all these NGOs are in power now within our governments. We have to reject this, otherwise we will, we create our own future. And again, the NHS during COVID, that was destroyed. Our NHS is destroyed now, and this is the problem. And they're trying to, as you know, it's really difficult to see a doctor. What they're trying to do is digitalise the whole NHS to make it sort of streamlined and into the digital age. So the Secretary of Health and Social Care has announced that NHSX, you probably don't know all these exist, NHS Digital and NHS England and NHS Improvement will merge. This new technology is predictive, preventative, personalised and participatory medicine. The NHS at its core will be working around genetics in disease, reaching into the DNA of every man and woman in the UK. This app will monitor every aspect of your life, your shopping habits, your financial and social status, your education, your hereditary genomics, fitness and more, feeding into the corporate superstate created by the COVID-19 crisis and powered by mass surveillance. According to NHSX, from 2020 to 2025, genomic medicine will be embedded into routine care. So they'll be looking at your genetics. They are absolutely obsessed with our genetics. And you wonder why. This has happened before in Nazi Germany with the Hollerith system. Do look up the Hollerith system, created by IBM. Well, it was created by Hollerith. He bought it from IBM, and it categorized everybody in the census before the war in Germany, where they knew who was who. They were able to identify certain social groups prior to the war. So this is all really deeply sort of weird Nazi stuff. I'm sorry, I really hate the idea of it all. And the thing is that the driver of most disease is not necessarily genomic. It's socioeconomic, it's diet. I think it's only 5% is genetic. We don't have to be what our genetics say. We can change that. But the NHS are using it as a driver, and that's really worrying. And this document, Absolute Zero, it's funny, I had this on my website for years before anybody's really picked up on it, and I talked about it really at every talk I've done for years. But because it's now come into we've now got net zero in every town council in the UK and climate emergencies. I think it's really important to look at the Absolute Zero document. People say, oh, it's called the UK Fires document. It's not a government document. Yes, it is. It was commissioned by the University of Oxford, the University of Cambridge, and many other universities as a sort of a meeting of all the documents they needed to push this one through, and it was debated in the House of Lords to be put into operation as soon as possible. And if you look at this, now this is, you've got a better screen, this is really good. You'll see that they've got a timeline here of what's to be phased out by 2030, and you'll find that actually no planes in or out of the UK between 2029 2030 onwards. And they're phasing out airports prior to that from, I think it's 2024 to 2029. There'll only be Glasgow, London and Manchester functioning as this is what they plan to do. This isn't necessarily what will happen, because we have other ideas. I don't believe in buying into their system, because I think they'll have a job to get this off the ground, like everything else they try. But this, and you can see that there's no shipping in or out of the UK. So hang on, how does that work? They're destroying our farming. So what happens, we're not growing anything in the UK at the moment. And I'll get onto that in a minute. So you've got all this timeline, and they want to phase out wood-burning stoves, all gas boilers, all gas heaters, heating systems, all gas cookers by 2030, which is why they're giving massive, massive grants to people to take up photovoltaics on their roofs and ground source heat pumps, which don't actually work. They were very inefficient in winter. So my opinion is that they want us all on electric because they can control that. No autonomous way of heating our homes. So this is a way of just literally at a flick of a switch, or if we had a Carrington event. There's a lot of earth changes happening at the moment. Maybe they know about that, I don't know. But we are due a Carrington event, and look it up. It happened in 1859, when the whole grid, because of the sun's solar activity, was pushing out solar mass ejections, it knocked the whole grid out. Now, Schwab has been talking about this. Would they fake it? Would they just flick the switch and just say, sorry, you're cold, you're poor, and you're hungry? Nothing we can do. So that's something to really think about. But this document is very telling. Do look it up. It's on the web, and look at that page. This is the timeline of when they want to phase everything out. And literally, if they stop shipping and planes out of our country, which I don't think they'll be able to manage. Even Bristol Airport's expanding some of its stuff. I don't know how they're going to do this, but this is the plan. I think they're mental, and they will do anything they can to achieve it. So this is, pretty unbelievable. Net zero, zero U. We're carbon creatures. We are organic. Anything organic. If they really want to get absolute zero, it means that nothing will live. I think it's a death cult. And then you've got the environmental and social governance contracts. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard about this, but most businesses are now getting the paperwork through to adhere to these social governance contracts, which is if you don't comply to certain recommendations or mandates that the government are putting forward to make your business environmental, then you will get sanctioned and you could be closed down. And this is awful. It's things like, businesses will be under scrutiny to conform to the ESGs. This will cost them and will emerge as a climate tax on every business in the UK. Are your employees cycling to work? You're now responsible, because you're a communitarian, to be responsible for how your employees get to work. Are you recycling, conforming to eco-regulations? Are you exercising diversity? Are you using clean technology? Are you using sustainable products? Is your workplace safe? This is massive bureaucracy and paperwork for businesses, as if they haven't got enough problems at the moment after COVID. And this really is a way of, you'll get the man from the ministry coming around and checking everything in your business. This is it's unbelievable. This is really going to stop. It's going to destroy more businesses. The ESGs, climate change strategy, biodiversity, water efficiency, energy efficiency, carbon intensity, environmental management systems, and then you've got the social score, which is all about equal opportunities, freedom of association, health and safety, human rights, customer products, responsibility, product responsibilities, child labour, and then you've got governance, which is business ethics, compliance, board independence, executive compensation, and shareholder democracy. Now, we are now living under almost like the public-private partnerships are owning everything and coming in, and actually they will take over. The whole of our government will soon be taken over by global governance. And this is being brought in by the Covenant of Smart City Mayors. Do make a note of that. If at the moment we have town councils, and I don't know if it's happened in your town council, but they've started what they call making everything unitary. So they're bunching together a lot of different town councils in one big one. It's happened in Somerset. where 5 councils have all come together. Well, that will be governed by the Covenant of Smart City Mayors, or they call them directly elected mayors. And the idea is to take us away from the decision-making on our local governments. And so the directly elected mayors will be very powerful in Parliament and will supersede our politicians. So our politicians, they have no idea this is coming. So the Covenant of Smart City Mayors, which Sadiq Khan is all wrapped up in, I know that my town council, one of them is in the Covenant of Smart City Mayors. He's a directly elected mayor. Directly elected into Parliament by who? Not us. The WEF have elected them to be in Parliament. So we're going to be under governance, not government, and that's a big problem. And, personally, in our homes, we've got the energy performance certificates. This is another tax on us because we've had those sort of rainbow things on our house details for years. Nobody's really taken much notice, but now they're really kicking in. And, if you still have a wood burner and you've still got a gas boiler, you ain't going to sell your house. You're not going to be able to rent it even. So these things are going to cost the homeowner. This is a way of you will own nothing and you will be happy, as Klaus Schwab says. So this is unfortunately the way they will do it. And you've got the public-private partnerships. PPPs are undermining politics and all Western government. Little do our MPs understand that the big business is destroying representational government in the form of an oligarchy. These extremely powerful multinationals have the ability to take over national governments globally to create global governance driven by greed. Corporate structure will undermine everything. It's the Russian-Chinese form of corporate communism, communitarianism. So we've got this. It really is a way of having governance instead of government. And please get involved in your town councils. Find out what they're doing. There's massive corruption going on. They're buying assets at the moment because they know the crash is coming, and you'll find they're buying buildings. And a friend of mine has gone. She's in her town council. She found that the council had actually lifted the village hall and all the grounds surrounding it out of the people it was actually in perpetuity for the people of that town, and they shifted it. The town council shifted it onto their asset register. They stole it literally by just putting it into their asset register. And she called it out, and about 5 of the councillors had to resign. So they are definitely trying to make assets because so many of them are going bankrupt. And the national private-public framework is it's the government's planning policies in the UK under sustainable development. They talk about town deals, levelling up. Look at levelling up. That's a big one. Drawn up at the Earth Summit in 1992. This document was drawn up at the Earth Summit in 1992 to get everything out of the public domain and into their state domain, so that the councils and the WEF own everything. So it's implemented in every town in the UK. And we have the financialisation of nature. How long have I got? So am I going on a bit? I'm fine, good. We've also got the financialisation of nature. Now, I've been talking to a lot of farmers in Somerset, and they're really worried about this because a lot of the farmers are their subsidies are being taken away if they don't adhere to the new system of not farming. So they've always had the EU subsidies, which were there to sort of the EU were in on this whole thing. It's paying farmers not to farm, having set aside. It's got worse than that. They're now being told they should not be growing crops, they should not be having beef and dairy farming and sheep farming, and that they have to make businesses out of their land. And they're advocating all of these different businesses, which are all shored up by public-private partnerships, so they're all getting a slice of the pie. And it's things like glamping, getting safaris, nature photography courses, well-being, even foraging has become a business. So they're putting up surveillance cameras in the countryside as well, because they don't want people on the land doing the foraging, because they want to turn it into a business. They're turning the whole planet into a business. This is the This is the horrible thing about it all. Our world is becoming a big business, and we're not part of it. We're not. You know, it's not. We have to be. We're not around. So all of these different sort of weird businesses, sales revenues, tertiary economy, they kind of are pushing all of this. And I've got a few of the farmers who had the man from the ministry come round, and he said, look, you've got to stop your beef and sheep cattle, because one of my farmer friends, all he's got now is beef and sheep. You know, he doesn't do anything else. And he said, well, if I get rid of that, then I haven't got anything, because I gave up the crop farming because of it just wasn't working financially. And so this man said, well, you can set up glamping. You can set up. He also said dog walking. Now, this my spidey sense got the dog walking thing. You may find, and I found it. There's one on my way to my next village, a field that has got deer fencing all round it, and a key code on the gate, and people pay to walk their dogs in a field. Now, this is weird. Why would you pay to walk your dog in a field? Why not just go to the woods? You know, the fields, whatever. And that I find really, because they're pushing this as a money-making scheme. So are they going to ban dogs or ban people from walking their dogs? I don't know. The whole thing is really weird. And then, we've got SEL learning. This is about sort of data harvesting our children within schools. And I'm sorry this is all a bit depressing, but really what we've got to do is rise above this. This is what they want, and there's more of us than there are of them. And I really feel that if we did it peacefully, maybe using our own way of doing it, we can actually overcome this by just saying we're not buying into your it might mean getting rid of all these devices. I've no idea, but the future isn't written. We have to write the future ourselves. Otherwise, someone else will write it for us. And we're always waiting for people to save us. This whole white hat thing. The white hats are coming. No, we have to do it. This is a time when we're in the Aquarian age, when people literally are the ones we have to save ourselves. And this thing with SEL learning, it's called social and emotional learning, where they've got cameras in schools to literally read the emotions of children. They're monitored and surveilled throughout their education. They're taught to be calm, practice mindfulness, which sounds on the face of it lovely, consider others before themselves, be proud to be part of a collective, and encouraged to adhere to the 17 goals. The 17 goals are being pushed in schools like crazy. The 17 goals of Agenda 2030. During this time, tokens are created on the blockchain when a child reaches a target, which is how compliant is that child? It's reached a target, where the impact investors get their rewards for investing in futures on that child's outcomes. So our children are being betted on the blockchain, a bit like they bet on pork bellies on the stock exchange, for their outcomes if they are good, compliant citizens who basically obey. And there's a wonderful woman in the States, and look her up. She's called the Common Core Diva, and she really goes into this big time. She's from the South. She's got a bit of a Southern drawl. She's amazing, but she's fighting for the children of America at the moment because of SEL learning. And it's things like schools are adopting something called STEM education, which is just science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These will be the core subjects to funnel them into the military-industrial complex that's being created. And forget ballet dancing, the arts, anything, art, crafts, whatever. All of that will be deemed useless, because it's not useful in their world. They want everyone funneled into the military-industrial complex, and to be successful, and to be compliant. That you've got the psychological profiling of children, data harvesting, pay for success schemes, information sold on to bond investors via non-fungible tokens on the blockchain with for-profit partners and enablers, social emotional learning, facial recognition emotions, gambling on the future outcomes of our children. It's ill-defined, unproven, and connected to Common Core. look up the Common Core diva. Yeah, she's amazing. And what is really, sort of key in this is that this is just happening, and we've also got the sex education in schools, that's really funneling into the whole transhumanist agenda. So I'll go into that in a minute, but I don't know how long I've got, but I'll just be very quick. I don't think I'll go into the 17 goals. I might do one of them. Now we're heading for what's called a zero trust world. And this is a way that they will really lock us into giving away all our data. So at the moment, we have VPN where you can just open your computer and you're there. You just have to put in your own password. But this is changing, and you're going to have to authenticate everything you do, whether it's a transaction for shopping, online, opening your computer, even looking at your emails. Everything will have to be authenticated. And the way of doing that is taking your facial recognition. And so we're living in this zero trust world so that you're deemed untrustworthy before you start. And this is a form of control. It's for your safety. No, it's not. It's so that they can be in control. Your facial recognition, digital ID, CBDC is all linked to this authentication process. Because with the CBDCs, just to make it clear, when you do a transaction at the moment, you use cash. It's anonymous. It's just between you and the seller. Totally, nobody knows what you buy, how much you spend, whatever. If it goes through your credit card, it's just a transaction between you and the bank. And the seller gets their money at the end of the day, so your bank knows. And there are at the moment things in place that the bank doesn't actually sell that data on. I'd like to believe they're not, but that's supposedly what that transaction is about. It's between you and the bank. When they go when they collapse everything, and they say, well, the only way that you can get your money back on your screen when you go to the cash point is to sign up to the CBDC app. That will link you directly to the central banking digital system that is related to all your data. So then every transaction you make, they can see your shopping habits, they can see where you go at night, what you do. And with that, they can also shut it down if you're bad. If you talk maybe like me, if you're one of these people that are going against the system, you won't have access to your money. And this is where we are going. So facial recognition, this is all happening in our supermarkets. Engineered food shortages and famine in Europe. Supply chain distribution with Brexit, Ukraine, and now what's going on in the Middle East. As a war, it's a reason for the destruction of food plants and explosions and fires we've had. The seizure of land under UN Sustainable Development Zero policies, net zero policies. The Dutch farmers had a massive fight to continue to farm. They're not through it completely, but they've really put up a fantastic fight, which wasn't in the mainstream media. But they stopped. Holland is really the food producer of Europe, and they were told they couldn't use fertilizer because it was derogatory to CO2. It was producing too much CO2, which they've used for years and years and years. And they really were, since the Second World War, they've fed the whole of Europe. Now, the food chain has been diminished because they stopped them for a long time, and they were blockading the roads and Parliament with tractors, and they finally won it. But farmers died. They were attacked for doing this. And the Irish farmers are being really attacked at the moment, hugely. Irish farmers have been given subsidies not to grow and to phase out beef and lamb, the same thing, production from 2025 to 2030. It's a land grab by carbon offsetting corporations, because they're using the land to offset. BA are buying massive swathes of our countryside to offset their carbon. They're buying into this, thinking, well, we'll be able to fly if we buy up land and plant trees. They're going to in their view, they're going to shut down the airlines anyway. So the whole thing is a nonsense, really. Farmers are being paid to rewild their land, and they're giving subsidies they've been given subsidies to retire, up to £100,000. We're not growing, certainly not enough to cover the losses of 40% of global Ukrainian wheat and corn that's gone. I've lost my thingy. Land is being turned into garden villages. Land is being taken over by development, solar farms, and set aside for housing. Should be greenfield sites are earmarked for development. In the 1980s, we produced 85% of our food in the UK. It's now 45% and declining. So food security is a big issue. This is, I don't know whether you can see, you can see this. This is brilliant. I did a bit of a deep dive with a friend of mine into the land in North Somerset and what the council, the county council had planned for the land in North Somerset. It's the only one that had it. South Somerset haven't got theirs together yet. But this is their land mapping. And basically, there's a button that you can press, and it's interactive. And you can press that button, and the whole of North Somerset lights up, and there's no land left for farming because all of those colours, there's red, yellow, and pink. The yellow and pink, one of them is wind farms. The other one is photovoltaic fields full of photovoltaic, solar panels, where animals can't be, and it's all very bad for the environment, all of these things. And then you've got I think it's the red ones, are building development. So where is the food? And this is happening all over the country. Where is the food? And we've got to really start taking some sort of responsibility for growing our own food, because they're not going to be importing it, and they're not going to be growing it. So we've got to do something ourselves. Store things up, do whatever you need to do. Then we've got the whole technocracy thing with the Internet of Bodies and Internet of Everything merging with the AI and the transhumanism agenda. And even the MOD have got a paper. You can look this up on the Ministry of Defence. Human augmentation: the dawn of a new paradigm. And they actually are buying into this whole merging man with machine to make super soldiers. And then you've got the Internet of Bodies. This is the World Economic Forum talking about the Internet of Bodies, which is where the machines merge with the human. And we've got it's very much easier to morph into transhumanism if you don't have two biological sexes. And this is the reason for pushing this whole getting rid of gender, getting rid of the sexes, the two different sexes, because it's a biological thing. It's not a mental thing. And obviously some people do have problems. But if you're not going to go the whole way and actually transition medically, then you've got something in between that can be abused, and that's the problem, and I won't go into that too much. But this is being pushed in our schools, that you can be anything you like. 5 minutes, thank you. We've got the undifferentiated human. They talk about the Stonewall were talking about the post-gender world, that we don't need two genders. This is the it's all a bit mad, really. And then you've got the metaverse, and encouraging people to go into the metaverse, and live reality privilege. They talk about reality privilege. So I did identify, and I'm just going to read them because this is going in my book. Where's this? I've just sort of identified 4 groups. And these 4 groups, and this is going to be the last 5 minutes, these 4 groups are really, I was trying to work out, people say to me, who's behind all this? Well, who is behind it all? And it's not just one group of evil people. It's many with the same agenda, but for their own ends. And I sort of put this together. I said, on the one hand, you've got, sort of people like Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission and all of that lot, and they've been there for years and years pushing this. The very rich people, they're the ideologues that envision a new system that best suits their fancy, a technocratic system where they need to manage and control people and assets on this planet. what they do and see is that financial growth has slowed down or stopped, and they're wanting to maintain their power by creating a new economic system that creates new markets and keeps track of all the inventory of the planet, including human workforce. They're wanting to cut cost in labour and thus automate as much as they can and bring in a strict surveillance with AI, blockchain, ID systems, cashless society, etc. So that's the globalist. Then you've got another camp, which is the very rich people, the stakeholders and the public-private partnership people, the people who are in it for the money, and they're wealthy investors, and they see an opportunity to make vast amounts of money by investing in the next generation technology. They don't really care about the ramifications of the common person, since they're not part of that pool. All they see is financial wealth and power emerging in these new markets. If it means people are going to be hurt, then so be it. It's their mindset that if there's collateral damage, it's nothing personal, it's just business. Big Pharma falls into this camp. And then you have another camp, which is the Elon Musks of this world and the Yuval Hararis, you know. They're very wealthy, and they're a scientific group. They're concerned about the future of humanity, namely our duration as species. Their belief is that we will all one day become extinct if we don't act now to take charge of our evolutionary trajectory. Their belief is that we have a duty and a right to modify ourselves. They see themselves as gods. And they want us to be modified in a post-human way, namely transhumanism, whether by DNA speciation or merging with machines as cyborgs or uploading our minds onto cloud systems or a combination of them all. It's our choice. They believe that if we are to continue to survive, we have to become like gods, like them, and redirect evolution and do it now. So these people are nuts. You know, we're dealing with absolute madness here. And then the last one, of course, is the military camp and intelligence agencies who may or may not be dealing with off-planet things. I have no idea. But they want to compete with AI for China, for the AI and the quantum computing and the blockchain supremacy. And whoever wins this battle will become the rule of the world. So the race is on with China primarily to become the digital superpower. For that to happen, data and lots of data in real time has to be accumulated so that AI can do the predictive analytics needed to advance the front of the global race. So this is kind of what we're facing. Will the human condition disappear? Only if we let it. You know, it's yet to, you know, our future is yet to exist. If you want to make your future, we have to make it ourselves. Otherwise, someone will make it for us. As long as we say no, and there are enough of us, then the human condition will continue, but we're going to have to fight. I can assure you that, because if you have transhumanism, that will alter the human species regardless of what anyone wants. It's our job not to give in. It's our duty to continue the expression of the human species, the biological human, with all its faults and quirks. There we are, the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions for Sandi. Anybody? Okay, Stan.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, are you aware, when you mentioned the young global leaders, that Ivanka Trump was one of them?
Yeah, I think he was, and Putin as well. I think they're all in it, you know. Yeah.
Sorry, Sandi, not Donald Trump, Ivanka, the daughter.
Oh, really?
If you Google, there's an article from the White House confirming it. I love to confirm things.
Right.
And also in Vogue magazine, there's an article, and too many people, in my opinion, are still thinking Trump's going to save us. She was his head advisor, and I think people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, I'm really wary of him. Yeah.
Well, apparently he's dead as of January the 28th, 2020.
What do we know?
2, I think. Another question for Sandi.
Anyone?
Anybody?
Oh, Jane.
Just remember that there are 5 mugs left because Sandi has the 6th. Well, she has the 1st. Okay, quick.
My God, Sandi, this collector's item. What I would like to say, people talk about transhumanism. What the fuck is transhumanism?
Well, it's...
I mean, what are they going to do? Change our things, cut men's bollocks off? What are they going to do? Because basically we are selected to be one thing or another. Men have calculating brains. So even somebody who's dressing like Doris and all made up to the nines, if something goes wrong under the bonnet of your car, most of them will get out and look and have some idea. Whereas I'm just going to cry and stand by my car until the AA turn up.
That's what we do so well.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the thing is that it's not really about male and female, and it's not about merging the male and the female. It's about creating a whole new different creature. And it's just whether it's just a... you see, what they're doing is they're... they're off their heads. They're totally mad. But the trouble is, all of this is costing a fortune. And so what's happening is our world is being destroyed for their ridiculous, crazy, psychopathic dreams. And this is what we're seeing. And all of this technology, they have got robots that actually move and can probably outwit a human being. But what they really want is a human robot. And so the change happens when they rewire the brain, a bit like Elon Musk's, I can't remember the name of his... Neuralink, yeah. And it's really not so much the biology as the brain. They create a cyborg, and that's the difference. And it's much easier to do that if you can create the undifferentiated human, which is the sexless human. Yeah.
Sounds like a grey. One more question.
Yeah.
Anybody? Troublemaker at the back. Cheap seats. God almighty.
That's a nice introduction. It's always puzzled me. I've been looking into this stuff a little bit. I really appreciate your putting all the data together in this story. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is their gain when there's power over nothing, when there is wealth that they cannot spend, when there is a control, there is nothing to control anymore? When all the human aspects are taken out of society, where's the joy in being so powerful, wealthy, or controlling?
Well, I've been chucking this around my head for a very long time, and I don't know. I've just got a theory, and it's only mine. Don't attach any truth to this whatsoever. But we are dealing with a massive amount of earth changes at the moment, and I'm just wondering if the elites know. They know that there is going to be a Carrington event, or at the moment the poles are weakening. This isn't conspiracy. This is actually happening. You can go onto Suspicious Observers and even NASA and see that there are massive earth changes happening, and the magnetic field has been weakening for a long time, and that kind of can sometimes cause a sort of magnetic reversal. I'm not a scientist, so I find it very difficult to get my head around all of this, but I'm looking at the way they're behaving, these people, these mad people, and it's almost as though, we know there's underground stuff going on in the Antarctic. The WEF have been out there. Hitler was there. There's something, really big about the Antarctic. Is it that they know that they can go under when all of this kicks off and they can come back up again when we're all dead? I don't know, but it seems that they're accelerating this agenda so much that there must be another reason for it. Either that, or they just want to genocide us all eventually, and have a world of cyborgs that they can control. And they've got dominion over the earth. And there is this whole thing about reality privilege, which is really a way of saying, right, we have the privilege of reality, and the proletariat can stay in their smart city apartments with reality headsets on and experience reality, because they're not allowed to now, because they're being taxed, carbon taxed. They can't move, they can't go anywhere. You can't go and see the pyramids in Egypt. So you experience everything through reality headsets, so that you don't have reality privilege. Your reality is in the metaverse, and your business is in the metaverse, and they'll try and make money out of you that way. With your UBI, you'll be paying for privileges in the metaverse, where they have the real privilege of experiencing life with all its reality in the real world, whereas you'll be in virtual reality. So that could be the other scenario. Who knows?
I think British Telecom called it Project Soulcatcher.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, there we
Okay,
are.
Sandi Adams, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Keep your mic. It's your mic.
Oh, yeah, my mic. There we are. How do I take it out?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a lunch break of 90 minutes back here for 2:30.